Welcome back to Going All In, Get the Edge You Need to Succeed. New episode, brand new guest today. I can honestly say that this person I have known for my entire life. Literally. My sister, Emily Harrison. Yay! Welcome, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so the idea for this episode came from me mentioning in my community nutrition class what you do for a living. And there were many heads that perked up, people that probably weren't listening were all of a sudden listening. Because I think I have a lot of students in my program that maybe somewhere in the back of their minds, they think being an executive director of some sort of nonprofit is maybe in their future. And that is why they're studying health and nutrition and food science and whatnot. So give us a little bit of an introduction to you and the work that you're currently doing.
Sure. So I am currently the director for Blue Star Families of Utah. We're the Utah chapter of the national nonprofit organization Blue Star Families. We're a military and veteran support organization. Started in 2009 by a group of military spouses who, at the time, although they felt like there was tremendous support for our military, there wasn't always a great understanding of the sacrifices that our military families give on a daily basis. So Blue Star Families was born in 2009. We have an annual survey that's been done every year since Blue Star Families was formed. So we collect a lot of data and then use that data to create all of the programs that we offer at Blue Star Families. So I came to the table before I was at Blue Star Families with a pretty significant background in family readiness and family programs. My husband was active duty Army for 22 years and kind of in that process of being a military spouse, obviously very involved in the unit and the unit family readiness group, which you're not familiar with anything military. Family readiness group is essentially all of the military families of that unit kind of coming together in a support organization to share information and resources. So I got my start as a volunteer. In that process, met some people from Army Community Service who kind of picked up on my skills and talents in various different areas, graphic design and journalism and different things, and was like, we would like you to come and work for us. So volunteering led to a job as a family readiness support liaison, or a family readiness administrative liaison, rather. We were known as FRALs. And so just really working heavily with units, creating newsletters and resources and teaching classes about all the things military life. And then that led to an actual federal position as a family readiness support assistant, where I was embedded over the course of my federal career in many, many different Army units, both active duty and Army Reserve, where I was doing all of the family programming efforts, really heavy social service, a lot of connecting people to resources. The military community, they have a lot of challenges that they face just by virtue of their military service, and it's really connecting those families to the resources that they need when they're struggling with those military family lifestyle issues. So I was working with the Army Reserve most recently here in Utah when my husband retired, and had the opportunity, was in some meetings with some folks from Blue Star Families when they were looking to start a chapter here in Utah. And initially was just like, oh, that's cool. And then the second time that they came out, just with kind of everything that was going on in the family programs universe in the Army Reserve, I kind of ran, not walked, to the gentleman after the meeting, was like, I need to apply for this position. And then the rest is kind of history. I started the chapter here in I came on in April of 2019, and then we launched the chapter here in July of 2019. Had a good few months start to kind of get things started, and then the pandemic happened, and then things got really interesting.
So what are some of the priority areas that you tend to do or tend to focus on when you're putting the, what you say, programs together?
We have multiple programs at Blue Star Families that are national level programs that we help to roll out at the chapter level. We have a Blue Star Books program that we partner with Disney on, and every quarter they get us books, and we work towards getting those books out into the military and veteran community. We also have another reading program called START, which stands for Serving, Thriving, and Reading Together. It's like a 6-week program that we try to bring together both military and civilian families together to read and have discussions about the books. And we have a Blue Star Caregivers program. So a caregiver is anyone who provides care or services for a loved one or a friend who, due to medical issues. So I am a caregiver myself. My husband's a disabled veteran. And so we support all of our caregivers, or people who consider themselves caregivers, whether it's a spouse, a parent, a child. We bring them together for special programming, kind of education resources, try to help empower them. So there's various different events, sometimes in-person social events, but usually it's online support groups and education opportunities. The majority of those are provided at the national level by our caregiver program manager. So a lot of virtual opportunities. Every summer, we have a Blue Star Museum program. This is probably what we're known best for, interestingly enough. But every summer from Armed Forces Day through Labor Day, we partner with museums across the country through a partnership with the National Endowment of the Arts, where museums agree to provide free admission to active duty, guard, and reserve families during that time, so that they can access museums. Summertime can be a challenging time for military families that struggle with finances, trying to keep children entertained in the summer months budget. So this is one of our most popular programs that families really love because it provides a lot of value. Go to any of our Blue Star museums unlimited times throughout the summer. So it provides a lot of value to our members. And then we also do a lot of in-person programming with our museum. So we partner with them for special opportunities, special days at the museum where they get admission, but then we may have some kind of special activity or a craft, or we've brought Blue Star books out to the museum so they can go to the museum, and then on their way out, they can choose books. We've done different things. We have here in Utah chapter, we have an annual night at the museum that we partner with one of our children's museums here called the Children's Treehouse Museum. It's in Ogden, Utah. And we do a special night. The museum is closed to the public. They get to come in, have the museum to themselves. The museum special exhibits and games and activities, crafts. And then we also bring out books, we bring out school supplies. We normally do it in the right before school kicks off for the year. So they leave with all the things, school supplies and books, and that's kind of like a end of the summer event for us. But we do a lot of programming like that with our partner museum. So that's where the fun element comes in. We have a Blue Star Outdoors program where we attempt to connect our military families with the outdoors, whether that's in our national parks or just a local park. I'm trying to provide special opportunities that they may not normally have. Otherwise, hikes, or some of our chapters have a fishing program that they're doing right now. Our Blue Star Summer program is very similar to our outdoor program, but just kind of creating summer fun opportunities, whether it's popsicles in the park or some kind of games or crafts in the park, just kind of getting people out during the summertime, engaging with other military families. Blue Star Welcome Week is one of our big annual programs. We have an entire week that we devote to welcoming new military families to our community. The summertime can be a big or a peak season rather for military moves, so permanent change of station moves, which we call PCS moves, from duty station to duty station. So typically by the fall, those tend to taper off a little bit, and families have become a little bit settled if they were new to an area. So we do the whole last week of September, we do a big week of special events and things that we call Welcome Week, and really try to welcome families to their community, provide them with resources, and let them know that they are welcome. And then our last and newest program is called Nourish the Service. It's new this year, even though our chapters have done a lot of work in military food insecurity over the years. We just based on the data and everything that we're seeing that comes out of our annual military family lifestyle survey, is that military food insecurity is a big issue. It's been an issue for years. It continues to be an issue. And then in communities that are really being hard hit by inflation and rising rental costs, it really puts a strain on military family budgets that were already strained to begin with when your rent goes up several $100s a month from what you were used to paying. So it can be rough. So we just actually created a branded program around our food insecurity efforts, and really work at the chapter level to bring special events, food distribution events, but then also education as well on food insecurity, educating not only the military community, but then also the general public, trying to help reduce the stigma that happens around that as well. Because even though we know it's a major problem in our community, families don't always feel like they can reach out and get assistance because they feel that will somehow down the line have a negative effect on their service member's career. But so we try to really help reduce the stigma. But we know that like doing one food insecurity event where you're providing families with food for that week is great. They get to eat for that week, but then what happens, the other 51 weeks a year. So we're really trying to partner locally with food banks and other nonprofit organizations that work in the food insecurity space to provide more consistent assistance to military families, so that we can really help combat that problem over the long term. So relatively new program, and trying to do some new things here in Utah, establish some relationships and get some food banks going where we can provide some ongoing support.
That's interesting that you mentioned that, because in class the other day we were going through a map of government assistance utilization across the mainland, and Utah was one of the states where it said that less than 40% of people who qualify for public assistance actually engage in it. And
That
so
is interesting.
I was wondering if that had to do with the culture of Utah, or is there that much of a stigma related to it in the military, in the Mormon community, that maybe that's why people are not reaching out?
Well, I think that is definitely an interesting data point for sure. And I think here there definitely are some cultural things that we see, or that I encountered, that are different from the other areas and states that I've worked in. That obviously we have a very high population of people who belong to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and they really, it's interesting, they have such an interesting model in the way that the church runs. And if you're not familiar with it, it's hard to describe. They just do everything right. Like everything is like record keeping, and how they take care of families. Like everybody is tracked, like they know who everybody is, like all of like the wards are really connected and the families are connected. So when they need assistance, everything is happening internally. So if they're not getting assistance from like within their ward, then they're getting assistance, through the church, and everything is connected. So like, even though I'm personally not LDS, my husband is, one of my sons is, my husband's family is. So that's kind of how I know how the church operates in the ward that we live in. Like if I wanted assistance, I could go directly to the bishop and request assistance. They have a bishop's closet that you can go and get all the food that you need. And then if you need additional assistance on top of that, they have a program through Deseret Industries here, which is kind of like the LDS Church's version of Goodwill, where if you need clothing or shoes or whatever it is, you go through the bishop, he authorizes it, and then you take like a voucher to the DI and you get what you need. So I'm under the assumption, although I don't know that this is true, that is internal to the church. They're probably not reporting any of that to any state or federal agencies. So I'm assuming that there's a massive amount of assistance that's occurring that way for families, that's not feeding into the data around that type of assistance. So if you are a member of the church, you don't necessarily need to go outside of the church to get assistance. So, these people aren't calling 211.
Mm-hmm.
We're not, doing those types of things to get assistance. And you don't have to be a member of the church to get assistance. Sometimes there's just some caveats to getting assistance from the church. For not a member, missionaries will visit your house and talk to you. They're not necessarily trying to recruit you, but it's just kind of what they do. It's kind of like that extra layer of support. Like if you do need assistance, like missionaries are going to come and they're going to help you. Like if you need help in your yard or that kind of thing, like they really do take care of each other. It's one of the good things that I happen to like about how their church operates.
So the folks that you're working with, they're not necessarily active duty, because I'm not even aware. Are there any bases even in Utah?
Yeah, we actually have a lot. But I think our community here looks a little bit different than other areas because we have, even though we're in Utah, we're landlocked, we do have all of the branches of service here, to include the Navy and the Marine Corps, even though we are a landlocked state. So our biggest active duty base is Hill Air Force Base, and it's a training base. So it's not like a typical Air Force base, but that population is only about like 4,500. So it's not huge. And they're definitely the smallest population not the smallest population. I take that back. I apologize. So they're one of the smaller populations. We actually have far many National Guard and Reserve population here. The Utah National Guard here is quite large. It's over like 12,000 service members. The Reserve is several thousand here at Fort Douglas and places all over the state. Then we do have a couple of other active duty elements. We've got Dugway Proving Ground, which is way out in the desert in Tooele. It's a pretty small population. It's a testing base, or installation. So I think it's like 250 service members, very small. Then we also have Tooele Army Depot is kind of the same thing, where it's fairly small active duty element. But yeah, so the majority of our families are going to be National Guard and Reserve.
So going back to the Nourish program, you mentioned providing education. Who are you bringing in to help you with these different programs when you don't possess the expertise that might be the most needed for that program?
Yeah, so it's still pretty new, but we have an amazing fellow at the national level, Kelly, who is really spearheading that piece. And it's really the partnerships that we create and bringing in other organizations that that do that type of work. So the education piece is still a little new, and we're working on that. The beginning of that is really providing resources. So we have a new page on our website that's devoted just to food insecurity resources that people can go and get education. So a lot of links to articles and blogs and things, and people can go in and get that information. At the chapter level here, I'm looking to kind of start some education pieces. We have some great partnerships here with like our USU extension, that's what they do, is provide community education. So we're trying to hopefully initiate some conversations around like what types of virtual or online content we can provide to families, resources. It's interesting because I used to, back in my volunteer days, I actually wrote a whole curriculum around like food shopping and grocery budgets and how to actually food shop. Like there is a correct way to do it and a wrong way to do it. And so I used to teach a class for a year or more when we were in Hawaii at the Army Community Service there, just really, teaching families how to grocery shop, how to use coupons, those different kinds of things. And I think there's a need for that. Again, I think as generations change, like our millennial population, that we're seeing, like our younger military spouses, this is not education that they have. Like they don't necessarily even know how to cook for themselves. They're a population that loves to eat out, and so really trying to figure out what the community needs in the way of education, and then creating programs around that. So that's something that we're trying to crack the code on now and figure out how we can provide that education to the community. So it's an ongoing effort.
So the programs that you have, are those sort of set at the national level, and then they expect the different chapters to figure out what to do, what's going to work for that particular area, or are you expected to come up with everything yourself?
They definitely give us a base to work with, but every single one of our chapters is unique, especially my chapter here in Utah. We have a lot of challenges that are unique to the state. So they really give us a lot of leeway to roll those out in a way that's going to work best for our communities. And we all have different things that are available to us, different organizations. So a lot of these programs look very different chapter to chapter, just depending upon who we're partnered with, what types of resources we have at our disposal. Some chapters are more remote than others, like our Missouri chapter, very close to Fort Leonard Wood, and just kind of talking like really remote areas. So our Missouri chapter director doesn't have the same types of resources that I have here in so they kind of give us that leeway and kind of the freedom to create what works for us, as long as we're operating within our left and right limits of the program. So
Cool. All right. So take us through maybe like a typical day that has one of your events that you're posting. I see the pictures afterwards when you post them on Facebook. So take us through kind of like a typical day or a typical week where you have a big event coming up. What are some of the things that you're really focused on?
it depends on the event. So I would say for a lot of our like small event, and by small I probably mean like 50 or less like people, or 50 or less families. I totally go back to like the Mary Kay principle of plan your work and work your plan. It can get pretty crazy in our space because there's always a lot going on. I usually always have multiple projects in the hopper that I'm working on. So, and sometimes I have multiple events in a day, so it can get a little hectic. So like right now, April is month of the military child. So next week I have like 3 events back to back that are going to be going on. So you're working on that current event and making sure that you have everything ready for that event, while also simultaneously planning like multiple events after that that may be happening the next week or beyond. So sometimes we plan stuff like months out. Like I'm already planning Welcome Week now, and it's in September. So it's like kind of just as things come up and new partners come up on a daily basis, or people reaching out for assistance. So you never really know what's going to pop up in a typical day. And my day never typically goes as it's supposed to. So, but it just depends on the event. Like small events, typically I can handle myself. So I'll go and I'll roll those out solo. Like our medium to large size events that require volunteer assistance, those get more complicated, require a lot more coordination and planning, and making sure that volunteers need to be, know where they need to be at, and then giving them direction as to what needs to happen. Like the best example of a large event is probably like one of our Nourish the Service events, where we partner with another organization called the Coalition to Salute America's Heroes. So for those events, we actually have a semi truck of goods that will be delivered to us, that anywhere in the neighborhood of 16 to 17,000 pounds of food, hygiene, and household goods that will arrive on a truck. And we typically have no idea what is going to be on the truck, so it's oftentimes a surprise. But we have to coordinate like essentially everything for that, receiving that truck. So we need to have forklifts and pallet jacks to move things around. It's about 24 to 25 pallets of goods that will come off of a truck. So figuring out how to download that truck and organizing the pallets, and then sorting. So those events, we typically, or how I do them in Utah chapter, is it's a 2 to 3 day event. We'll receive the truck on one day. We'll have 2 days of sorting before an actual distribution event. So we'll get that truck downloaded, organize the boxes. Sometimes we take and we combine them because everything comes separately. So we got to combine food and hygiene together, and then organize all the extraneous stuff that will come on that truck. Last time we had like laundry detergent, there was books.
Is it like wholesale lots that someone sold off that you're getting?
No, a lot of it, the trucks come from Feed the Children. So Feed the Children does a pretty good job. Like there'll be 400 boxes of food that are pre-sorted on the truck. There's 400 boxes of hygiene that there's semi pre-sorted. They have volunteers that assist, and they kind of put together like whatever they have, and they try to fill the box. So sometimes there'll be like 5 things of razors, or like 30 boxes of eye drops. Like you never know what you're going to get. So we kind of go through and we kind of cross level everything, because we want to, make sure that when families get, a set from us, that, they're getting items that are going to be useful to them. So we want to make sure that they're not getting like a half box of, 30 boxes of eye drops. Like, so many eye drops. So just trying to cross level so that we make sure that all the boxes have as many things as they can, that kind of thing. And then they have like a lot of extra things in there that they'll include. And it is like kind of wholesale donated things. Like, so there'll be some things from like CVS, or things from FabFitFun, things from Avon. There's a lot of Avon actually. And then there'll be feminine hygiene that's kind of mixed all throughout. So we actually create separate feminine hygiene kits, and then we ask families as they come through if they even need them, which sometimes, especially in our veteran population, the older population, they don't need feminine hygiene products. So so it allows us to kind of to utilize those in other ways. If we have things left over, we donate a lot to women's shelters, that kind of thing, after the fact. But yeah, so there's just a lot of volunteer prep. It takes anywhere in the range from like 60 to 100 volunteers to execute like a 2 or 3 day event like that. And then on the last day will be the distribution day of actually doing a drive-through. A lot of our events just recently have been drive-through events because of the pandemic, where we will just have families roll up, and We're literally dropping things into a trunk or into the back seat. Sometimes we have other things that we're able to provide that we can give them some options on, or if they have kids, we'll give them books. We have other things from our chapter. We have little buddy bisons that, like, it's like a little stuffed bison beanie animal that it's a partnership with the National Park Trust that we have. So we have a ton of those always. So we'll give those to the kids. And sometimes we can provide grocery vouchers for fresh items or gift cards, grocery gift cards so that they can get fresh items. And so, yeah, so that's like a big event where it's just a lot of on the ground running around, making sure volunteers have what they need. They know where the bathroom is or where they can go to get coffee or water or a snack. There's also a lot of times media that's involved. So then you've got media calls to worry about, and making sure that when media does come in, they're getting all the photos that you need, because ultimately they're the photos that I'm going to need after the fact for grant reporting and that kind of thing. And then actually doing interviews, media interviews. When we partner with a lot of local companies and organizations. So it's a lot of sometimes meeting with like the lead liaison for like Discover Card or whoever it is that's coming in. A lot of times they have questions, especially if there's like a VIP. There was somebody that was like a VP and Dominion Energy that came in, and he wanted to know everything about Blue Star Families. So you're talking, doing like a mini brief as you're trying to put together feminine hygiene kits. So that kind of thing. It can get wild some days where it's like you don't even know how you made it through the day, but you're also at the same time answering emails and calls and texts and different things from, like I said, from partners who want to talk to you about an event that's happening in 2 weeks. So it's a lot of running around and doing stuff on the fly some days.
So when you are talking about your grants, are you writing your own grants, or are you relying on someone from Blue Star Families to handle that for you? How's that work?
Yeah, so we're lucky in that we have a development team that works with us. So I have a senior development manager who's assigned to me that will help me with those processes. So sometimes she's identifying grants and then asking me how we can implement them in the chapter. And then sometimes I'm coming across grant information and I'm passing that on to her. And then we'll work together to pretty much to make those grants happen. Sometimes we even do grants with other partner organizations. So like our partnership with Treehouse Museum, they were writing a grant for a military and veteran support program in the museum. So they had to liaise with us because like we were the partner in the grant. So like, but I always do everything with our development team. They're the experts, and they have all the boilerplate and everything that we need for those grants. And then they work in tandem with our applied research team that has all the data. So we're lucky in that way that we do have a team approach to those types of things.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting for the viewers to really see that there's multiple roles that you can take on depending on what your area of interest is. So we have a lot of students that might be interested in research or evaluation, which is huge as part of the programming process. And say there are folks out there, college students, not college students, who are thinking about going into the nonprofit sector, maybe in your type of role or a different type of role. What are some of the skills that they should expect to have, or what are some of the skills they should work on acquiring to really set themselves apart when they're going after those positions?
Yeah, it's interesting because with my background, I went to school for technical theater design, which obviously I'm not doing any technical theater design in my current work. So really everything, all the skills that I bring to the table were learned along the way, usually like trial by fire because of the lifestyle that I had being a military spouse. I did have some background when it's interesting because when I was in college, I sat on the resident hall advisory board, which is essentially like family readiness groups for the dorm is like almost the same exact thing. So it was like, that's kind of like where I learned to take minutes, and where like I got like my base of programming, like events and programming. So
And making commercials. I remember that.
making commercial, yeah, all the things. It was interesting, and it was kind of, at the time, it was one of those things like, well, this is just fun, like I do this for fun, and like literally had no idea that that was going to kind of become the background for like literally everything that I do currently do in my career. So it's interesting how that played out. But then also, I think just like by virtue of the way that we were raised, and volunteering in the church and volunteering at the nursing home and the things like those types of things, I kind of already kind of had that volunteerism background. And I would definitely say that that's where I think people are going to get the bulk of their experience, is going out and actually volunteering. That's one of those things that we get that question a lot from military spouses who, because of that lifestyle, they have gaps in their resume, or they haven't worked just because they haven't been able to. And so they come to us and they're just like, well, how do I even begin to get skills in any area so that I'm employable? And it's like, go out and volunteer and start actually doing the work, in whatever it is. And that's how you develop those skill sets. So when I was first like a volunteer in like just my husband's FRG, before I ever started working in the field, like my entire background was Apple products, and we used Apple products at home. We used Apple products at school, and then everything military is Microsoft. And I had to learn that all on my own, like learn how to use Word, learn how to use PowerPoint. And I had to just learn those skills on the fly. And that was all through just strictly because of the volunteer efforts that I was doing. So yeah, and because there's definitely, I mean, the nonprofit world is here to stay. There's no lack of work in the nonprofit field, and every nonprofit out there needs volunteers. That's just the way that it is. Our organization is majority volunteer run, at least the programs and events that we carry out on the chapter level. So there's definitely not a lack of things to do out there to kind of get those skills. So it's really like whatever you're interested. Like if you're interested in food insecurity, volunteer at a food bank. You're going to get a lot of education very quickly on how they operate, and what needs to happen on a daily basis to get that box of food to a family. So yeah, I think it was just being in that space. And then when I actually worked embedded in units doing programming, a lot of times there was a lot of defined programs that were in place, either at the Army level or the unit level, and we were kind of working inside those parameters. But you just kind of learn how to work with people, and diverse people from all walks of life, and really just trying to figure out how to best serve the people that you work for, essentially. And it was just kind of years of doing lots and lots and lots of events, and figuring out what works and what doesn't work, and what saves time, get things done, and how I acquired all of those skills. And then trying to get in as much professional development opportunities that you can, especially if they're free. There's tons and tons of free professional development online that's out there now, or even just YouTube. I mean, it's as simple as that, really. Even though I don't from a development standpoint, I'm not necessarily a development person. That is not my background at all. But just over the years of, especially when you're working like an Army family readiness group or that type of environment, there's no budget. You have zero budget to work with. And so over the years, I got very good at figuring out how I get stuff and get stuff for free to make the programs that I needed to do happen, not realizing that that's a development skill. Asking for stuff and asking for money, it's this almost the same thing. It's a little bit different skill set for money, but I got very good at doing that over the years, and that kind of translated very well to the development work that I do. Because even though I'm not out writing grants, I'm still out meeting with companies, meeting with other organizations, and essentially trying to get money to fund my chapter. I do have a requirement that I do have to bring in X amount of development dollars each year, just so that our chapter can be, sustained, and make sure that we're here for the long term. So it's little things like that you kind of pick up along the way, that you never know what that skill is going to do for you down the road.
So I'm going to switch to asking about work-life balance, which I think is interesting for you and I, because we grew up in a household where that wasn't a priority. Work always came first. Would you agree with me on that? And
Oh,
that
absolutely.
that rubbed off on us. And so when people ask me my work-life balance, I'm like, it's balanced. Like, as long as things are getting done, the sacrifices are made more on the personal side. How have you been managing this with James at home and four teenagers under one roof? Like, how are you managing all of this?
So it's so funny that you mentioned that, because your upbringing, I think, has everything to do with work ethic. So, and I think for me, it was maybe even a little bit different, because when you're 12 and you complain one day that you're bored, and the next day you have a job that your parents dragged you to and was like, you're bored, go out and work.
And you had that job for like 6 years.
Yeah. And that's even funny too. Like that was experience where, you think you're just like picking weeds and loading corn into a bin, but that turned into me running that place pretty much by myself at the age of 16 and figuring out, like running a business, essentially doing all the ordering and all that. So yeah, I think that's kind of where that came from. Like, and I hear this all the time about how I have like the craziest work ethic, and I think that's really where that came from, because it's like that was kind of what was drilled into us. Like, work is the most important, like that is your income, and you don't mess with that. So I do think that that's kind of where that mindset that I have, that like work is everything. And I did see that when I got married and then had to stop working because of having children. I literally lost my mind, because I wasn't getting up and having to go to work every day. And like literally was having like a crisis of identity, because I wasn't able to get out and go to work. And that's where me volunteering started, because I literally needed to get out of the house. I needed to be useful. I think that's what it is. Like, if I don't feel like I'm useful, it drives me insane. So if you ask James, my husband, he will tell you that my work-life balance is just like absolutely the worst. And I think that kind of came from a little bit comes from the situation that we kind of have been in since, we've been married. Is my husband was enlisted, and there is a very big pay disparity between the enlisted and the officer side of the house. And so a 2-person income in an enlisted family is like pretty much a requirement. Like, it's a necessity, because otherwise you can't get by without it, especially if you're a lower enlisted family. It definitely got easier over the years as he went up in rank, but there was still always that 2-income requirement. And it always felt like I was the one that had to make sure that like had enough money, we had budget. And there was times that like I was literally working 2 and 3 jobs at the same time just to make sure that everything, because on the military side, you don't really have a lot of like, once you make a certain rank, you got to do certain things. Like, you don't get a pay raise every year. Like, that's not how that happens. So if you need more income, it's dependent on the spouse. So for years, like I kind of had that mindset of I have to put my head down and work. Like if I put the work in, then eventually like something's going to happen. I'm going to get a pay raise. I'm going to get a promotion. So it was just kind of like years of like, I'll get to a point where I'll be able to rest or be able to take a break. And I haven't felt like I've been able to do that this entire time. So even I did have a weird period there where, due to a military move, I had to leave federal service and I had to completely learn a whole entire new career. I went into healthcare administration, and had to learn everything. And so like I felt like that was my priority. Like I have to learn this new field, and it was just work, 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 work. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of this kind of craziness that comes with that. And if you're not super on top of it, which I feel like when I was younger, I had a little bit better grasp on, I've got my meals planned, and so that whether you can, hit the ground running when you get home and you're making dinner and you're doing all the things. I think as I get older, my ability to multitask with the family stuff gets less and less. So I do depend a little bit more on the kids, especially now that they're older, to do certain things around the house. Sometimes cook dinner. But that is the thing that's particularly rough with this job in particular, because it's not a 9 to 5. It's not how it works. When you're doing programs and events out in the community, you're doing them hopefully at a time that's convenient for them, not necessarily a time that's convenient for you. So we do a lot of evening programming, we do a lot of weekend programming, and like there should be that balance of, well, if I'm working on Saturday, I'm not going to work on Friday or whatever it is, or I'm going to flex and I'm not going to work Monday. But sometimes there's just so much work. Like there's so many things that are going on that I don't always have that option to just like not work the day before an event. Like there's usually always all the things that need last minute things that need to happen, running around, running errands, kind of thing. It's difficult. So it's definitely rough, especially like this last week. The day prior to my last Nourish Surface event, I had a 15-hour day. Just kind of like you plan a certain day and then things go, like the weather was really bad. We were trying to do a loadout and there was a truck parked that was blocking. So instead of quickly loading stuff into a truck, we had to walk all the way down and around a corner when you're loading out like hundreds of boxes. Like it took hours and hours to do. And it was just like the day just didn't go as planned. And so when I got home prepping for that event, like I still had full inbox that I had to tackle. Like I had due outs that day, that I had deliverables that were due. I had reports that were due. So sometimes you're up until midnight, so that try as much as possible to not have your next day be a hot mess, even though the day before was. It's hard. So like you really have to have it together. You have to figure out like what is work for you and really try to plan it as much in advance as possible. So if I have an evening event, sorry guys, but you're in charge of dinner tonight because I'm not even going to be home. So you got to figure out how to make it work, but it can be rough. I will tell you that all the places that I can save time, I try to do that as much as possible, but it doesn't always work perfectly like it should. But yeah, so I definitely depend on my family to pick up a lot of that slack. And it's interesting because when you're a military spouse, you tend to try to do, you're doing everything especially when you're in an active duty scenario, because you never know when your soldier or service member is going to be called away to do something. Like you get surprised all the time, like surprise, we're going on a training mission, or surprise, TDY happening next week, or you're going for a short-term training somewhere. So I kind of always was the one that did all the things, all the kids' doctor's appointments, all the kids' school stuff. Like I was responsible for everything plus my job. But so that's a little bit better now that James is retired. He can he picks up the slack on some things that he wasn't able to do before. So that's good. But it's definitely, I would say that the nonprofit world is, it's just one of those things where it's very hard to gain a work-life balance, especially when people know that like you're a resource in the community, and if somebody has an emergency on a Saturday, you're getting a phone call, and it's kind of like, are you just not going to talk to somebody because it's Saturday and you're supposed to be off? Like, so yeah, and I used to be on call, used to have a duty cell phone when I worked in some on the federal side, so I was kind of always on call. So there's just been a lot of things over the years that have just made it to where like I'm just the worst work-life balance person ever. And trying to figure out what self-care means for you when you're a hot mess all the time. So yeah, it can be rough.
But like I said, I don't think we're 100% to blame for that.
We're not. It's definitely nurture.
Speaking of mom and dad, which one of them do you think gave us our drive to want to be in charge of everything?
Dad.
I might have to agree with that. I don't know.
Well, it's kind of almost a tie, because I always, so for me, Dad, to me, always seemed like a jack of all trades. Like he did everything, and he like seemed like he was good at most everything except sports. But when it came time for me to like figure out what I wanted to do, I was like, well, I want to do all the things because he did all the things. And I think he is where we kind of get, or where it was ingrained to us, like do things right the first time. Like there's a right and a wrong way to do things. And I think that was kind of where we got that from, of kind of pushing and like being your best self. Like we're not half-assing it. Like that's where we got that. But on the same token, like mom, even though very, very different career paths, education paths, like when she did go into a job, like she was all in, and like she was going to do it. Essentially, she's not going to half-ass it. Like she's going to do it and do it well. And then I think that's how kind of she, excelled in what she did. I don't know. It's a interesting question.
I feel like when I was giving a leadership talk like months ago, and when I really stopped and thought about it, I was like, our parents put us in the same room as a lot of important people growing up that I didn't appreciate until I was older. We were surrounded by politicians and people important in the community and people important in the business world. And they were just, John and Joe and Patrick, and like they were just the friends and the people we were like volunteering with. And I didn't realize until now. I was like, we were in the same room when we were 6 and 7 with people who are senators now and people who were running for president, and we were just able to observe them just in kind of their natural element. And I don't know if some of that rubbed off on us as far as our ability to manage people, to work with people, to adapt to situations where there's just a room full of people we don't know and we got to figure out what to say in the next 5 minutes, that sort of thing. I don't know if that's where it's come from too.
And it's strange because like if you would have asked my what age self, like you would have told them what I'm doing now, they would have never have believed you in a million years. Like I don't feel like I was like, leadership positions were not anything that I was looking for. Like I just wanted to be like my C-type personality, like let me work in my bubble. Like, oh, we have to work together on a report. Okay, I'm going to do this whole report and then we're going to turn it in together with your name on it, but I'm doing all the work like that. Like that's kind of how I was.
Mhm.
And we totally got that from dad. Like it was just, I was not very outgoing. Like I don't want to get up in front of a room of people and talk. Like I don't want to bring attention to myself if I don't have to. And it was just, I think it was like when I got to college, it was just like, so like I made reference to when I was involved in like the RHA stuff. It was like I kind of just got in there and it was just like, for whatever reason, like those leadership qualities that I didn't even know that I had, just kind of like, all right, here we go. I'm running this. You want to come with me? Let's go. But I'm in charge and we're doing this. And it's funny because mom made a comment back. My goodness, I think it was when you started college, and I guess they went for a visit, and there was something that was going on with like something in your dorm or something with your RHA. And she was just like, if Emily was here, she'd be running this place already. I was like, maybe so. I don't know. So yeah, it's weird because I really don't know where that ever came from, but like kind of once, and even when I'm like not trying to be in that role, like I can only go for so long before I'm just like, I'm running this, because that's what happened. Like when I started in healthcare, like I was just supposed to be this extra temporary person sitting in an office doing paperwork essentially. And within 3 months, I was running the office because like I just couldn't. I was like, wait, what is going on? Like, why are you doing it this way? That's not the correct way to do it. You need to do it this way. And then people started coming to me, because they felt like I was in charge of stuff, even though I wasn't in charge of anything. But yeah, it just kind of happens even when I'm trying to not have it happen. So,
It has gotten to the point where when I get involved in something, I'll start to ask questions, and Brian will be like, do not take over. It is not your thing. And I'm like, I'm not going to. I'm just asking for them to clarify how they run things so that I understand. And he was like, no, you're trying to figure out how you can do it better. That's your problem. And so I've gotten
yep.
to the point where I've kind of stopped telling him that I'm involved in stuff like, surprise, I was elected president-elect of our state dietetics board. He doesn't know that yet. What is one thing that you still really want to do with your life that you haven't been able to do yet?
Figure out what it is that I want to do. Yeah, it's just, I think that was like always the struggle. And I kind of like, it was just kind of an interesting transition from like wanted to be a cop for the longest
I
time.
remember that.
And what is funny is
Is it
that
because you dated a cop?
no, but like it was funny because I wanted to be a cop, and then I was talking like my senior year of high school, I was actually talking to the Army recruiters because the Army has a world-class athletes program. And so they were talking to me about that. And like literally when mom and dad found out that I was even talking to the Army recruiter, like literally lost their business. And I just think it's funny because it's like, I think they did everything they could so that I didn't go that route, but then ended up marrying a soldier, like full circle right back and into that like unpredictable lifestyle that I think that they did not want for me at all. So yeah, so then like college, it was just like, I like literally thought that I was going to be in Vegas forever. Like, why leave Vegas? Like I will be employed here in theater work forever. Like this is the mecca of all things entertainment. And honestly didn't think that I was gonna leave. And then met James, left Vegas, and literally never got back to a point where I could get back into that world. Like even just to finish my degree, like everywhere I've gone where I've tried to do that, they're like, ooh, this is like super, super specific. And like the credits that you have left were like super like theater specific and like weren't available anywhere that I needed to do. So it's kind of been one of those things where I've never been able to get back to a point where I've been able to finish that. So that in and of itself, just being in the position that I'm in now, in my field, like the majority of like the other chapter directors all have master's degrees and or PhDs. I do not. But I have that. It's just from the years and years and years of experience that I have, like that's kind of carried me this far. But trying to get in levels higher than that, like eventually like something is going to have to happen. I'm going to have to go back to school, and I am not the best student, so that was never really my thing. So
That's like the one that's how we're polar opposite.
we'll see. Like I think I could have been like better at school, like had I really like applied myself. Like that's what I struggled with all throughout high school, was like that balance of like how much I want to actually do schoolwork versus how much like I'm gonna go out in the backyard and throw hammer. Like it was always that thing. Like I would have much rather have trained than done any schoolwork. That's always been the struggle. But yeah, I think I've kind of just like I've had to reinvent myself so many times over the years, just with moving to a new community and not knowing what I'm going to be able to do for work and having to be adaptable. And I think I totally surprised myself with, because I totally thought I was going to be just screwed when we got back to Hawaii and there was nothing available. The position that I worked in for years away, having to like let's take on this healthcare thing, because I really felt like my ability to learn new skill sets was not there, but just kind of had to do it. Like it is what it is, and you just kind of have to put your head down and do it. So kind of gotten to that point where I'm kind of tired, very exhausted, and I don't know that like I have the energy to like reinvent myself again into like something else. So I think I've just made that decision that this is kind of like I can't see myself doing anything else at this point. So now it's really trying to figure out, like, again, the leader in me. It's like, okay, so now how do I move up in my organization? Because I've done this job for a little while now, and now I'm like itching for like what's the next big thing? Like, is there something else? Is there something higher? Because that's just kind of like how we're programmed. So I don't know. So yeah, I'm still trying to figure out, like, I don't know, like if this is just like what I was meant to do or what. I think I've been fighting it for a little while now. I don't know. We'll see.
Thank you again for joining me for this episode of Going All In, Get the Edge You Need to Succeed. If you'd like some more information on Blue Star Families of Utah and the different chapters across the U.S., I've included some website links and some information about their social media pages in the description below this video. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss our next episode. And I think we might have a good second episode with my sister with some different outtakes from our discussion. Stay tuned. We'll see you next time. Bye.